Welcome back to The Rancher's Voice, the podcast where the heart of agriculture meets the pulse of today's industry. From policy changes to leadership stories in the Western lifestyle, The Rancher's Voice dives into the stories that matter most to ag producers.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Rancher's Voice. Thanks for joining us. I'm Raylee Honeycutt. Missing Ellie Brighton today, but have two gentlemen joining us today from the Department of Livestock. We have Mike Honeycutt, Executive Officer, as well as Jay Bodner, who is the Brand Enforcement Division Administrator for the department. Thanks, guys, for joining.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Podcast, you both have been on this before. This is not a familiar or unfamiliar area for you, Jay. Jay used to, if folks remember, used to actually serve as the Executive Vice President of the Montana Stock Growers Association. And so great to have you back. Does it feel like the good old days?
Yeah, it does. It's great to be back, and enjoyed it when I previously did it with you, and we had some great podcasts in the past, and look forward to today.
Excellent. Well, many of you probably listening are very familiar with the Department of Livestock and these two gentlemen and the work that they do. But for some of our listeners, Mike, who may be new to the podcast or haven't listened before, may not even be living in Montana, give us a little background about yourself and the department and how you kind of got to your role at the Department of Livestock.
Oh, certainly. Well, I'll start because the department is obviously a lot older than I am. So I'll start by talking about the department. We've been around since 1885. Had our growth out of the Montana Stock Growers Association when it was formed, and also the Montana Wool Growers Association when they were formed in the early 1880s, eventually creating what has become the Montana Department of Livestock. But today we're responsible for animal health and food safety, so all animal imports, exports in terms of veterinary health inspections, disease surveillance and disease control, the veterinary diagnostic lab that's in Bozeman, where we do all of our regulatory veterinary diagnostics and also other work for veterinarians and producers around the state. On the food safety side, we are responsible for all meat, milk, and egg inspection within the state. So that includes our state-inspected facilities that get a mark of inspection from us and can sell in grocery stores, wholesale to restaurants, things of that nature, as well as our custom exempt processors that can process animals to return back to the owners. On the milk side, we're looking at the dairies and the dairy processors. And on the egg side, we're doing the shield grading of all eggs, USDA shield grading of all eggs that are coming through Montana. Primarily, that's in Great Falls at the Montana Egg Products. But Jay, as you mentioned before, is in charge of our Livestock Brands Enforcement Division, which regulates livestock dealers, livestock markets, the brand inspections, so the movement inspections that happen, the actual registry of ownership of brands across the state of Montana, and the tracking and compliance of all that data should it be needed in different investigations or animal health situations. And the last big area of the department really is predator control. We do have a mission for predator control with non-game species, primarily coyote and red fox. So we do a private aerial hunting program. We're supporting USDA Wildlife Services in their aerial hunting and government trapping for coyotes and red fox across the state of Montana. So a pretty diverse slate of responsibilities that the department's responsible for. I came to the department in February of 2016, so I've been there a little over 9 years. Originally a native of North Carolina and worked in agriculture all my career, primarily ag education, but also some private industry work in grain procurement for a couple of years during my career. But have been at the department as executive officer for the past 9 years, and glad to be here, glad to be in this role, and glad to be in Montana.
Absolutely. And you mentioned predator control. I feel like we could have a whole podcast on that on its own and dive really into that program and all the great work that you guys do in partnership with Wildlife Services. Jay, you're newer to the department. I guess I shouldn't say newer. It's been 3 years. 3 years. So you're one of the old guys now. But tell us a little bit about your background and how you were led to the Department of Livestock.
Yeah, great. So my background is we family ranch, cow-calf mainly, a few yearlings out there in the Rainsford area, so east of Great Falls. about 35 miles. Been involved in agriculture my entire really professional career. I worked for the Montana Stock Growers here, started in 2003, 2002, and worked there for 20 years. And then I served a lot of roles within the department, enjoyed really my entire career here at the Montana Stock Grower Association. And then there was an opportunity at the Montana Department of Livestock with the Brands Division Administrator. And so I took that opportunity, been there for 3 years. Really, the Department of Livestock, as Mike mentioned, we have an enforcement arm. We have a compliance team, and then we also regulate the livestock markets within the state. So there's a lot of cattle movement across the state of Montana, and we do our best to make sure that we can track those cattle, we can inspect those cattle. And ultimately, the goal is really we're protection for producers. We want to make sure that people that are selling their cattle get paid, and people that are selling those cattle, those are their cattle and not their neighbors. So it's certainly an important part of the cattle industry in Montana, and fast-paced, but certainly enjoy all parts of that.
Well, I have to give you a shout out too. You probably can't see it on camera, but Jay is wearing his stock grower's pen, so he gets bonus points today for that. Mike, you kind of gave us a little background and history about the department and how, Montana stock growers and wool growers kind of came together to form now what is now the Department of Livestock. But something unique about your agency compared to the other state agency is that you have a board of livestock, and that does serve as the governor appointed body. Can you just share with our listeners how that works and kind of how that came to be?
Yeah, so historically, many state agencies were led by citizen boards once upon a time. So in the early 1970s, Montana changed its constitution, went through a major government reform. There were several more that took place after that. I think even into the 90s, Jay would probably have more information on that than I did. But most agencies went, the constitutional state agencies, so your Montana Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources Conservation, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Department of Livestock, those that we call the constitutional state agencies that are set as agencies within the state constitution. Most of them transformed during that period to a governor-appointed director, one director appointed by the governor who's responsible for the operation of the department in the name of the governor. And of course, they or go with the governor. They have to be Senate confirmed. The Department of Livestock, among those constitutional agencies, was the only one that has sort of kept its pre-1970s structure, in that we have a director that is a board that is required to be active ranchers, 4 of which have to be cattle producers, 1 of which has to be a sheep producer, 1 has to be a swine producer, and 1 has to be either a dairy or poultry representative. And so that's how you get the 7 members. And they're appointed to 6-year terms that are staggered, so they don't necessarily serve the same term as the governor who appointed them. So you get some continuity and crossover between governors as board members serve more than 4 years. They serve 6 years. And so they're responsible really for the policy development of the organization. So all statutory changes would go through the board. All rule changes go through the board. The board is the approver of our budget before we even submit it to the governor's office to get through to the legislature. So they have a lot of authority over how we do our business at the Department of Livestock. And they also serve a quasi-judicial function. So whenever stakeholders might appeal matters, decisions that are made by staff of the Department of Livestock that they don't agree with, they can, or certain other matters that we have to handle, they can bring those to the Board of Livestock, and they basically sit like a group of judges and provide and make a judgment based and render a decision on that particular outcome. And so they serve sort of that function as well, beyond just their oversight and direction of the department. Obviously, they hire me as their executive officer to manage the day-to-day operations of the department. Again, my position is apolitical. I'm hired by the board, not by the governor. And so therefore, that's why I've served 9 years in this role, even though there's been 2 governors. And I guess now the way timing worked, in the 4th gubernatorial term, even though it's only been 9 years that I've served in this role, working with the Board of Livestock, even as the Board of Livestock has changed. And I should mention, just like all other directors, those board members, when they're appointed by the governor, have to be confirmed by the Montana Senate to officially. They can serve before that, but to become official in a term, they have to be confirmed by the Senate. So it's basically they work just like the appointed directors at other agencies, except there's 7 of them, and they have to work to find consensus and majority on the policy decisions that run the Department of Livestock.
And one thing that I think is unique and great about and the board and their board meetings is everything's public. You guys do a great job streaming those board meetings. Public participation is welcomed and encouraged. And tell folks how they can kind of find where your board meetings are streamed or broadcast.
Yeah, just as you mentioned, we actually have a legal requirement to live stream our meetings whenever possible. And in 2025, it's kind of hard to find scenarios where it's not possible to live stream a meeting because of the technology that we have. One way to find out about the meetings is to look at our website. So we do have a Board of Livestock section on our website that will usually have the date and location of the next meeting. As we get closer to the meeting, the actual agenda will be published there, so you can see what's going to be on the agenda, what type of decisions or discussions the Board of Livestock is going to be having. There's a way to either show up in person at the meeting. Most of them are held at our office location in Helena is the physical location of the meeting, but there's the opportunity to participate by Zoom and to provide comment on items of interest, and there's directions there of how to contact. Currently, Donna Wilhelm, who serves as sort of the secretary for the board, is the person who receives that contact, and you can get the Zoom link from her to participate. And if you don't want to participate and you just want to watch, there's also a link on board meeting days. You just follow that link, and it'll take you to YouTube, and you can't participate in the meeting, but you can watch it as it's happening. We always have the recordings of those meetings published within a few days after that up on our website. So if you've missed a meeting and you want to go back and watch it or watch parts of the conversation, those recordings are there. I think we have recordings of meetings for the last 10 years almost up on our website that you can find. And we also do maintain an interested parties list. So if you ever email Donna Wilhelm there at the department, who serves as secretary of the board, she'll add you to the interested parties list, and then you'll start getting an email saying the board has scheduled a meeting and when it's going to be, and all of the information that you need. So the first place is go to the website, but I would encourage people to get on our interested parties list so you just receive those emails that let you know when and where board meetings are taking place. And then, as you said, that information is always there, captured historically to go back to if people want to go back and watch it if they were busy and couldn't take part or see what was happening that day.
Great. I always appreciate that. Ellie and I, we do have sometimes double booked or multiple meetings happening, so it's always great to go back and just kind of take a recap of what happens at the Board of Livestock meetings. So appreciate that. Well, let's dive into legislative session. We just kind of wrapped up legislative session, and I feel like our listeners are probably sick of us talking about legislative session, but we didn't talk much about your bills because they were somewhat simple red tape bills, but they're very important and interesting bills, so hopefully we can dive into that. But what I thought would be helpful is that a lot of times when we go into legislative sessions, folks reach out to us in like November, December. They have ideas. They're like, let's get this bill to the legislature. But for a state agency, you guys are, if not half a year, almost a year in advance working on the legislative priorities that your agency brings to the legislative session. So, Mike, maybe can you give us a little recap on what that process or timeline looks like, just for our listeners to understand that really there's opportunity for our membership and our listeners to engage in your legislative priorities way far in advance before the legislative session starts.
Yeah, it's a good point. And we also have the extra step of going through the Board of Livestock. And of course, we do that in our open public meetings. We talk about what legislative needs we have. So there's the opportunity for stakeholders to bring issues to the board that they think need to be addressed. but also our staff will be bringing forward issues to the board that they think need to be addressed. And that process will, if we're looking forward to our next session, which I know it's hard to talk about that already, that'll be kicking off in January of 2027. In March of 2026 is when we will begin preparing our legislative slate for the 2027 session. So we generally have to have the board approve any agency legislation by the end of May. And so we will bring ideas or receive ideas from the public during that time period, get those formulated. Then we have a step of having to go through the governor's office policy staff. So we'll take those legislative concepts, and in the summer they'll be reviewed by the governor's office policy staff, and then they'll make whatever tweaks, changes, or if there's something they don't want us to pursue, they'll let us know at that time. So that process happens in the summer. And then usually by late summer, early fall, all those agency bills, we go through our oversight committee, which for us is the Economic Affairs Interim Committee of the legislature, not to get their approval on our bills, but to just talk to them about what bills we're going to bring in the next session and get them slated for drafting with legislative services. And then we actually have to find sponsors for those and have those introduced by the middle of December. So to your point, if you came to us in early January with a bill concept, we've been working on that for 9 months, and we're already past all of our deadlines that we can do that as an agency. It doesn't mean that as a citizen, you can't take that to a legislator and have a legislator bring that bill, but it can't be a Department of Livestock bill. And where that becomes a complication is that at the same time, we're also building out the governor's budget. So in that same time period in the spring, we will be bringing all of our budget needs to the Board of Livestock for their approval. And then same process, we have to, any things we're going to change about our budget have to go through the Governor's Office of Budget and Program Planning and be approved by them before it becomes a part of the governor's budget, which gets released to the legislature in November. So by November, we're done with our budget. And then as an agency, we're sort of locked in. We have to support the governor's budget at that point because we're an executive branch agency. We've had an opportunity to share with the governor's staff what we want to do, had an opportunity to tweak that. So once the legislature starts, when people have a bill idea that's going to make a fiscal impact, our natural response is going to be, no matter how good the idea is, we're going to be opposed to it because it's not in the governor's budget. Or if someone wants to make a modification to our budget directly, that's the same way. We can't support it, no matter how good an idea it is, because it's not in the governor's budget. So, to make that simple, if you've got ideas for our budget or ideas for legislation that you think need to be carried by the department versus your stakeholder organization, or you just going directly to your legislator, you need to be in contact with us and the Board of Livestock early next year, January, February, March of next year. You need to be bringing those ideas, and that's really only 6 or 7 months away.
Yeah, it's interesting with agencies that once the legislative session ends, you go straight into rulemaking, and not too long after that, you're into the next session. So very much a long lead time for agencies and their policies. Mike, I'll loop back with you around budget and some of the things that you guys asked for and maybe what your budget looks like for this upcoming biennium. But Jay, a lot of the bills that we saw came out of your kind of area this last legislative session. So do you want to give our listeners kind of a recap of what those bills are and how you are working to make their lives a bit easier?
You bet. So, the department, we did not have a real aggressive agenda when it came to legislation this year. I think all 3 pieces of legislation came out of the Brands Division, and we were really looking at 2 were some real historical pieces of statute that no longer really applied, so we wanted to repeal those. And then 1 kind of looking forward in adopting a little bit of technology and how do we utilize those kind of technologies for convenience for producers. So I'll start with that one. One of the things one of the things that we did implement was allow people to travel with a copy of an inspection, so an electronic copy. So you could take a picture of your cell phone of your inspection, of your market consignment permit, off your computer screen, or a transportation permit, and you can travel down the road with that to your destination. One of the things we pattern that after is Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. So you can, if you get checked for your fishing license and you're like, I don't have it on me, but here is a copy on my phone, that suffices. So we did kind of pattern our legislation looking at that also. So I think as we move forward, we're going to continue down the electronic path, electronic inspections. That's really the way of the world. We want to provide additional conveniences for producers out there. So we will continue down that road. Another part of the...
Can I ask, when does that go into effect? Is that in effect now, October 1st, July 1?
So that is in effect today.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, and one of the other things that we look at, that the conveniences that will provide for producers, is if you have a number of horses that you're traveling, you have lifetimes on 10 horses, you decide today that you're going to take 2 or 3 of those horses. If you were to get stopped at a compliance check stop, you would be able to provide that documentation of those pictures of those lifetime horses, and that would suffice, because we can go back in the records and we can verify that's all accurate information. So anybody that may be traveling in the rodeo circuit or in the rodeo crowd, I think that will certainly be useful for them. One of the other things that we see that will be useful is if you have a number of trucks where you're loading up and only one has the inspection, the other truck drivers could take the copy of that, a picture of that inspection, and then they can also travel with that. So we think there will be multifaceted where that will be useful for producers and folks to move down the road with. The other couple pieces of legislation that we did implement also is there was a provision in statute where if you ran a feedlot and you had an animal die, you had to have a state brand inspector inspect that dead animal, and then we had to provide that information by mail to the producer. Frankly, there was many in the feedlot industry that really didn't know that law was even on the books. And so we did quite a bit of work with feedlot producers across the states to really ask, what happens in industry today. And in most cases, there is a direct communication between the feedlot owner and the livestock owner. So on the health of those cattle, any animals that die, and frankly, really the extra requirement and cost of inspecting those dead animals just doesn't really make sense in the world that we live in today. So we repealed that. There was a penalty associated with that also, so that we repealed that penalty also. And then lastly, there was a piece of legislation on the books that went back to at least 1931 as far as I researched it. It may have gone farther back than that, but it required brand inspectors to stamp carcasses. So we were looking at halves and quarters of carcasses. So not from a animal safety, a meat and safety inspection standpoint. It appeared like it was to ensure that it was an ownership stamp. And we don't have the employees to be able in every meat facility in the state of Montana to be doing that. And we haven't been stamping those quarters for many, many, many years. As far back, I don't know that I know of anybody that even remembers that. So that's something that simply was outdated. It needed to be modernized. It needed to simply be removed from the books. We do make sure that we do are required that there are inspections of animals that go to the feedlots, to the slaughter facilities, so that we do check ownership that way. So we are still ensuring that ownership is correctly being done of any animals that go there. So that suffices in repealing that statute.
Excellent. Yeah, so agency-wise, you just had 3 bills, correct? Those were the 3 bills. And then obviously other bills came down the pipe as legislators introduced legislation. But Mike, wanted to kind of jump back to you regarding budget. For the most part, the department fared pretty well. Obviously, most agencies took some minor cuts as they went through Section C. But give our listeners just an overview of like where your budget is at. And then one component that we came in and supported was your decision package regarding equipment and things for your new diagnostic lab, which we haven't hit on, which was something that we worked on many legislative sessions leading up to the 2023 legislative session. So maybe give our listeners an update on the status of the vet lab as well. And ground has been broken, building is being built, and opening date may be coming in our near future.
Yeah, I'll start with the budget side. We were very, very fortunate working through our budget, both with our section subcommittee for appropriations, full appropriations, all the way through the process. Outside of our standard budget, the things that we asked for was we asked for roughly about $1 million to help with the move of the lab. So as you can imagine, we have lots of lab equipment that has to be moved from the old lab to the new lab. Some of that has to be done very carefully and professionally, so it's not like we can just load it up on trucks and take it, because we could probably damage the equipment, and in some cases the equipment has to be recalibrated when it's brought into the new facility by someone from the manufacturer. In some cases, we also wanted to use some of that money to replace equipment that it wouldn't make sense to move from the old lab to the new lab. It makes sense at this point in time to buy a new piece of equipment for the new lab and have it delivered there, as opposed to trying to move it. A lot of people may not realize, but just the incinerator alone that we use for getting rid of animal carcasses and tissues is roughly a $500,000 to $600,000 purchase just for that incinerator. So everything within that lab can be very, very expensive. But we were successful in getting those funds added to our budget for this upcoming year to be prepared for that. And when I say funds, it's in many cases we're talking about budget authority. We're using the per capita fees, the brand inspection fees, the lab fees that veterinarians pay. A lot of what we're paying for is state special revenue that we're collecting, but we're just getting the legislature to give us the additional authority to be able to spend for that purpose. We also are adding some staff to our meat and poultry inspection area just to be prepared for, well, one, to deal with the growth that we've had over the last 5 or 6 years, but then to be prepared for any future growth in meat and poultry inspection. So we're adding 4 additional staff to that area. We also were doing a little bit of fund switching. So we've had cuts to our federal animal health umbrella, what we call umbrella funds, but our cooperative agreement with USDA APHIS for animal health. That budget has been reduced, but programs such as the DSA and other animal health programs we're doing, the emergency preparedness programs we're doing to be prepared for foreign animal disease, I think they need to carry on. So we were doing switches of federal funds to state funds. We weren't adding to the budget, but we were just changing what pot of money we would pay for those expenses out of. We also had to do that in our dairy area to avoid some big fee increases. So many may not know, but our dairy inspection program had been wholly funded by the dairies across the state. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that the number of dairies has decreased significantly over time, and not exactly in direct correlation, but the volume of milk produced in Montana has also gone down. And so that's how we were assessing those fees. So it was difficult to fund that program on fees alone. We were able to get the legislature to understand that the general consumer of milk has some skin in the game on that. And so there is some general fund coming to that program. Dairy producers will continue, and processors will continue to pay fees to the department, but there will now be a general fund component that basically has the taxpayer, the consumer of milk, paying into that program as well, to be able to maintain the staffing that our dairy producers need. We also, in the milk area, also needed to replace some of our milk lab equipment that was aging, and so we were able to get the budget request for that approved as well. So we didn't ask for much. It was probably 6 or 7 decision packages altogether. Now, what your listeners may want to know is that we kind of already start with a base budget, which is past year's spending, and then they apply. The legislature applies a inflationary adjustment to that. There's also any of our other shared expenses that we pay to the state. So rent on buildings, what we pay for leased vehicles for our employees to be able to get where they need to get to, all of our IT technology services that are provided by the state, so our internet costs, hardware costs, software costs. Those are all baked into our budget. And so sometimes our budget will increase because those increase, not because we asked for that, but those are services that, based on the number of employees we have to pay the State Department of Administration for. So we started out. So when I talk about those decision packages, those are things that are in addition to that base budget that was approved. And I should also point out that the other thing we don't really have complete control over is personnel cost, in the form of there is a bill that sets what the pay increases or benefit changes will be for state employees over the next biennium. So the legislature approved for all state employees to receive a $1 per hour increase in their rate of pay, or 2.5%, whichever is greater. And so that personnel cost is another thing we have to absorb. The legislature has decided to provide that raise to all state employees, so that'll apply to all of our staff as well, who will receive that. So that also has a budgetary impact. But that's another one of those things that's a little bit out of our control. That's within the legislature's control and what they're going to set for that. So you'll see increases to our budget, but I also want to just point out to your listeners and our stakeholders that not all of those increases were increases that were directly decided upon by the Board of Livestock. Some of those things just happened to us as we go through the budgeting process. But for the things we needed, it was a very successful session, and we got the things we think we needed. As far as the lab, it is moving along. The building is taking shape. We broke ground last spring. But you drive down on 19th Street in Bozeman now and go by where the new lab's going to be. It is starting to look like a building. And so a lot of the exterior work is starting to come together, and they're actually working a lot on the interiors of the building already. And so we're on point to move in there in February of 2026, March of 2026. So less than a year from now. We'll be moving into that new facility, and we're very excited about that.
Yes, I think everyone's excited, and it's a great opportunity for our state to kind of have a state-of-the-art leading science institution for our state veterinarians to have access to, which is great. So we talked about the legislature a little bit. Obviously, my answer to this question is that folks should join Montana Stock Growers and get their information. But for those producers listening, and kind of like there's so much stuff to keep track of, like, do you guys have any recommendations on the best way for producers to keep track of like law changes or disease threats or updates or things like that your department is working on?
Well, I think you pointed to it earlier in our conversation. I think the easiest way is to pay attention to what's going on at the Board of Livestock. So any change we're proposing in actual law or rule is going to go through the board, and that's where the public has an opportunity to influence that, and to provide their public comment on that. And so, whether you're able to participate in every Board of Livestock meeting or not, and that's why, stakeholder organizations, I encourage them, stock growers being one, but all of the others, to pay attention to our board meetings on behalf of their members, to see what things are happening and be able to get that information out to their members through the tools that they have. But that's probably the easiest way to pay attention, because any proposed change we're going to make in law, rule, or budget is going to have to go through the Board of Livestock and is going to be discussed by the Board of Livestock. So if you're paying attention to the agendas of those meetings and then either watching or, actually participating in those meetings and providing public comment, that's going to be the best way to know what's happening, is to pay attention to that. And then, of course, getting on those interested parties lists. So, as I said before, if you're on our rulemaking interested parties list, if you're on our board interested parties list, you've emailed in and asked for information in the past, you're going to get that notification that a new rule has been put out for public comment, and what the time period for that is. So those things will happen through those types of lists, without having to go and watch like the administrative rules register, which most members of the public are not very familiar with how to do that. And many are familiar with how to watch through the legislature, but sometimes that's a little bit too late. If you want to have influence on things before they even get to the legislature, paying attention to what's happening with the Board of Livestock month to month is the best way to do that.
And I would add also on our website, as Mike mentioned, at the Board of Livestock, so all the attachments, so all the drafts of any proposed changes of a rule or certainly statute, all that's provided to the board, and that is available also on the for the general public. So you can certainly look through those documents quickly and see what the changes are, and it's a relatively easy review.
Excellent. Well, one of the other changes that's kind of happened within the department is in the last year and a half, you guys transitioned to a new brand software. How's that going, Jay? And kind of paint a picture of like what the ultimate goal or the end goal is with some of the work that you're doing with your brand software.
Yeah, so September of 2023, we implemented what we call Service Now. So it's all-encompassing, all-comprehensive brands database. So this covered our to issue a brand, transfer a brand. It also did compliance for us. It encompasses that, and then also for the livestock market. So it was a major shift. We were put into a position where the previous database was no longer supported, so there was no help. If that were to break, there was nobody there to fix it. So we were caught in that position where we needed to do a complete overhaul of the system, and it was going to be, while we did it, we said, well, it should cover everything that we do. And so that was the kind of the thought behind when we did incorporate that new system. Timing-wise, we certainly would have liked to put that in place in June or July prior to what we would consider kind of the fall run. But as in many cases, when you implement systems, things get a little bit delayed. And so ultimately, it was September when we did implement that. There was certainly a learning curve that I think we went through from staff, for producers, for livestock markets. And we wanted to make sure that, we certainly didn't, impede commerce. We did have a couple of rough days. I would admit to that. We did overstaff markets. We wanted to make sure that we had enough staff there to be able to operate the computer and operate the system as we were learning. As we got through that fall and into the spring, our staff certainly knew the ins and outs of that system very well. And now we're running really smoothly in it. There's some real advantages to that system. Like I said, one system covers all of the brands division. We can look at data much more specifically, much more just really when you look at individual operations or markets or inspections. That is really at your fingertips. You can run a report and find all that information. One of the other advantages that we're really looking at is to be able to implement electronic inspections. So we can do that now with our state staff. They can do it all from a cell phone, and there's a great advantage to that. Now, we still are printing that off to a piece of paper to provide to the producers, but ultimately our goal is that we would like to transition fully electronic and be able to do that all through a cell phone and an email or a text. And so the system right now is really working well. We pulled information out of that's been very useful in doing a lot of research for us. And so we're happy that it's in place now, and I think we've got all the bumps worked out, and we're operating pretty smoothly.
And then your department also just rolled out a new brand search functionality on the website, correct?
We did, yes. That just became live. We had previously, there was an old brand app that was on our website, and there was a lot of producers that utilized that system, that app. Frankly, one of the downsides was that the day it was put on and put live, it was outdated because we didn't have the ability to continue to update that. So this brand search is live, so it encompasses all 51,000 plus brands that we have registered in the state of Montana. You can look by town, county, major, minor character, location of the brand, species of the brand. You can plug in as many of those factors as you would like, and then just hit apply, and certainly it will bring you up that search. Because it goes through 51,000 brands, there are times where you have to be a bit patient, and you do need to have cell phone coverage or internet service to be able to do it. But it is live, so it is 100% accurate, which makes it certainly a real advantage, I think, for producers today. So it's on our website. It's on one of the home pages there where it just says View Montana Brands. As you hit that square, it'll take you right to the page. There's a little bit of text there to show you how to use that, and then a little button that you push, and then you're into the system. So we've had really good feedback from that, and I think people are just starting to utilize that now, and we think this will be a nice, real useful tool for people in the future.
Yeah, great tool if it's real time and up to date when take a look at it. Mike, before we kind of wrap up, just wanted to hit on EID, mandatory ID, free tags versus not free tags, and just can you give our listeners a status update of what the department has done, is doing, and what you've been working on around that space?
Yeah, certainly really well aware of once that rule went into effect in November of last year, that there were some things that have caught people by surprise. I think the biggest thing that we've been trying to get out there is that I think everybody was well aware of the certain out-of-state movements of cattle that were going to require official ID and require it to be RFID in the future. But probably what was a little less known was any of those movements or actions that were going to require animals to be officially ID'd were also brought in under that rule and were required to be RFID. So the big one for Montana would be brucellosis vaccination. We obviously have a very, very high percentage of brucellosis vaccination. In Montana, we have a large swath of Montana where vaccination is actually required by rule because of our designated surveillance area. So either within the designated surveillance area or the counties that border the designated surveillance area, vaccination is required. It's not even a choice. But we're also aware for marketing purposes, most people choose to vaccinate, not just necessarily maybe as a precaution, but it does have marketing value when you're selling cattle. So those requiring RFIDs as that took place, I think took some people by surprise. One, our allocation of tags was not what it had been for the metal clips that we used in the past. So we had less of those than we had metal clips, and then we had to allocate them as fairly as we could across veterinarians and markets across the state. So some people run into a situation where if your veterinarian had already used all of their allocation, maybe you were getting charged for those RFID tags and you had not been charged for metal tags in the past, and so there was maybe a little bit of a sticker shock and a surprise that took place there. And so, that's been an issue we've heard about. We've lobbied at the federal level to try to get those tag allocations, and our stakeholder organizations have helped us with that, trying to lobby to get those allocations up to where maybe it would be like it was in the days of metal tags, that, pretty much all of the vaccination tags would be free, just like those metal clips were free in the past. But what we recently did is we brought that issue to the Board of Livestock. So we had some leftover spending authority for the year. So the Board of Livestock at their most recent meeting here in May approved us to spend $240,000 on RFID tags, the focus being brucellosis orange tags for the next year to augment our federal allocation and try to stretch that out and provide more free RFID tags for brucellosis vaccination. Now, we've not yet figured out, the board's asked us to bring back to them an allocation plan of that's roughly going to get us, 80 to 110, depending on what kind of deal we get, 80 to 110,000 additional tags. How we allocate those across veterinarians within the state still has to be brought back to the board and figured out, the actual allocation plan, or whether we might not make those completely free, but charge a little bit of a fee for them, which reduces the cost and spreads it out, and the ability just spreads it out more across all the people across the state. So that's going to be part of our plan for next year, to put a more of a dent. Now that may not be something we can do every year, but it was something we had the financial ability to do for this upcoming year, and maybe take a little bit of that sticker shock away from producers. But twofold: we either need to get increased allocations from the federal government of RFID tags that they provide to the state, or find ways to fund how we might do it at a state level, like the board decided here to do in May, are really the two solutions to the issue. But it has been quite an issue for producers, just because once we moved away from metal tags and using RFID tags for vaccination, for lots of other program type work, was not something I think a lot of folks were prepared for.
Well, our time's about up, so as we kind of wrap up, I did want to kind of ask both of you, as you're on the forefront and kind of seeing the issues arise prior to maybe producers on the ground, what is something that you're tracking right now within the industry that our producers should be putting on their radar, starting to pay attention to, or whether it's regulatory or animal health or things like that? What would each of you say is something that kind of is top of mind for you right now, and something that you're watching?
Well, yeah, I say I would go first. I think what's always top of mind for me is, making sure that we have the types of activities in place to track what's going on, so we can get to answers fast. Now, whether that's foreign animal disease preparedness. So we saw, the curveball last year with high-path avian influenza showing up in dairy cattle. We see what's happening with New World screwworm, although that's not quite as big an issue for us here in Montana, maybe as is in the southern plains. But we see how we need to be able to rapidly respond and react to those types of cases. So having biosecurity plans in place, being able to track the movement of cattle and the crossover of cattle. So whether it's RFID tags, brands, this animal disease traceability, I think is key, because how well we do with that, should we deal with a major event, is what's going to allow us to get back to commerce faster. Is if we have a good idea and we can isolate problems and deal with those problems and get other zones of the state opened up for commerce and get them moving faster. So all of that work we're doing around animal disease traceability and foreign animal disease preparation, and the regulatory work and the CVIs, the brand inspections, all those regulatory documents that sort of put that together is really important. And I don't want to be remiss. I mean, you can see that theft and fraud in the cattle industry is still a huge deal. And you can read every day about instances that are happening. Thankfully, I'll knock on wood, in other states. But that's also remaining vigilant about why we do what we do. There's a reason why we regulate cattle movement. There's a reason why we do the change of ownership inspections the way we do. There's a purpose to that work, even in 2025. It may not seem like it, but it is there because those regulations, that control, that documentation, I think discourages a lot of nefarious activity. And so getting support for that, making sure that people participate in that and are doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, also protects our industry at large from theft and fraud. So those are really the big things that stay on my mind is how do we maintain support for that system we have at the Department of Livestock that protects all of our individual producers around the state, because those things can easily become under attack from those who don't really understand why we do what we do and have never really maybe experienced the other side of it, of if you are in a theft or fraud situation, if you're in a foreign animal disease investigation, that documentation becomes very, very important at that point in time.
Yeah, I would just follow up a little bit on the investigation side of things. So one of the technologies we've implemented is Google AI. So all the handwritten inspections are fed through that system. Then that automatically goes into our ServiceNow program. There is still some manual entry of brands. So Google AI isn't quite good enough, smart enough to read a brand yet. But like as Mike mentioned, any of those type of investigations, because all those inspections would be in the system, we'd certainly be able to narrow those investigations down to really more specifically the individuals or ranch or county, and hopefully have less impact on a wider range of producers, and we would just get narrowed down to where we need to be. So that'd be very useful. I think the other thing with brands and compliance, enforcement, we still do have enforcement on the books, so we want to make sure that people, as they move cattle around in the spring, which there is a tremendous amount of cattle that move this time of year to summer grazing pastures, inspections are required for any change of ownership or change of pasture, or if you go across county lines. So we do a number of enforcement compliance checks across the state, and we have those at just various locations across the state. So anybody will have signs up. Anybody hauling a stock trailer, we would make sure that you stop at those. Just show us our paperwork. And we want to make sure that we are protecting producers, as Mike mentioned. That's the reason that we do those enforcement checks, to make sure that as people move around, they have the proper identification and proper documentation. So be on the lookout.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today and for providing updates on what's kind of happening within the Department of Livestock. For our listeners who may have questions or want to follow up with you guys on something that they heard today, what's the best way for them to get in touch with the department?
Well, certainly I think the best way usually to get in touch with the department is via email. My email is mhoneycutt, HONEYCUTT @mt.gov. That's something that we're looking at every day. Sometimes we're traveling around. Phone calls can be hard, and returning messages can be hard because if you're not at your office. But email is something I know I'm looking at every day. That's the best way to get in touch with me. I think that's many of our employees would say that's the best way to reach them. Jay, any?
No, I would agree. And email for myself, j.bodner @mt.gov. And then we also do have a general brands phone call. So if you want to leave a message, and if you have just a general question, typically we'll always have somebody there to answer, during the 8 to 5 type hours. And so anybody that has those questions, if it gets more specific on maybe something more detailed, then that will end up on my desk too, and we can get those calls returned.
Yeah, and I should point for general department items, there's a main line department. It's 406-444-9321. Usually whoever answers that, most of the time it is an employee at our office right now named Donna Wilhelm who answers that call. They will work to try and get you to the right person regardless of what your issue is. If it's brands related, meat inspection, milk inspection, animal health, predator control, they will work to try and get you to the right person in the department, or at least make sure that person knows that you need to get call back from them or a response to get a question answered. So that's a good general number to call for those who are looking to come in by a phone call and don't really know who they want to talk to. That's a good way to start.
Well, great. Well, thank you guys so much. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today on this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and feel like you know a little bit more about what's going on with the Department of Livestock. If you are listening, please make sure to subscribe to where our podcast can be found or on YouTube. And also make sure to follow our Montana Stock Grower Association Facebook and Instagram pages. We post a lot of updates, especially with Department of Livestock. Their Board of Livestock meetings get posted there, as well as some of the regulatory comment period and changes in laws related to the agency get posted on our social media. So check that out, and we will talk to you next week. Thanks.